Welcome back to another episode of Career Tea, the show where we unpack real career journeys, lessons learned, and what jobs are actually like behind the scenes. I'm your host, Sohrab, and today's guest is David Stewart. He's worked at Deloitte and EY Parthenon, led billion-dollar M&A strategy, and now drives long-term financial planning for ultra-high net worth philanthropic organizations. Outside of work, he's a self-taught machine learning enthusiast, a deep thinker on performance and personal growth, and he has just happened to be a Division I swimmer at Notre Dame. David, so excited to have you on today. Welcome to Career Tea.
What an introduction. Thank you, Sohrab. I'm happy to be here.
Of course. I'm so excited for our conversation today. There's a lot to unpack. Before we kind of go into, career and how you've gotten to where you are today, I want to start with this. You were a Division I swimmer at Notre Dame. I know Notre Dame's Division I swimming team is top 15, I believe. That is no small feat. So I want to know, what was that journey like for you? And did you always kind of know you'd be competing at that level growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. So my swimming journey was a little unconventional. I would say I didn't really know I was going to be a swimmer from day one. It sort of happened by accident. I was taking swimming lessons at the YMCA where I grew up. There was one day where I was doing free swim, so like just hanging out in the pool pretty much with other kids. And then turns out I wasn't a very good swimmer at the time, so I actually started to drown. A lifeguard who actually later became my first swim coach rescued me, recommended that I continue taking lessons, and then as I progressed through those lessons, I naturally joined the swim team. I also played basketball, played baseball. Wasn't very good at those, unfortunately, as many people can attest. And so I just stuck with swimming. And then I continued swimming throughout my childhood into middle school and high school. High school is where I really started to separate myself from the pack. I became pretty good in terms of the New York metropolitan area, then eventually sort of on a national scale, qualified for junior national championships. I was
Wow.
one of the top butterflyers in New York State. And eventually that led to me getting recruited by several Division I schools, one of which was Notre Dame. So I took my recruiting trips to Notre Dame. I felt that Notre Dame had, out of the schools that were recruiting me, the best combination of academics and athletics
Hmm.
that I could get, which I was primarily focused on rather than just like a powerhouse athletic school on its own. That's how I ended up at Notre Dame for swimming, and I swam there for 3 years. I did not do my final season there, but I did swim there for 3 years, and it was tough.
Yeah,
Like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was
I
doubles,
bet.
morning practice, and all of that.
Yeah, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that in a bit. But I'm surprised that, I when I started swimming when I was a little kid, my first experience too, when my parents put me in a swimming class, when I went there, they had us like swimming the deep end just from one side to the other. And with like a little board, and I remember flipping over and almost drowning. And after that, I told my parents, I was like, I'm not going back there again. And I didn't swim for years before I got a little older, and then I started swimming a little bit. So I'm surprised that with your bad experience starting out, you were still like, no, I'm gonna keep going. I want to kind of figure this out.
Yeah, it's definitely, swimming definitely scares several people away, I would say. It's like your life is pretty much on the line, not to
Right.
be dark about it, but it's I can see, why. In my case, it was really just I fell into it, if that makes sense. There was never really a conscious decision on my part to be like, hey, I love this. I want to be a swimmer. It was just something that I just was. My parents kind of pushed me into it. Coaches kind of pushed me into it. And then eventually it became my identity during at least the first half of my life.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you ever have like, I guess going through from when you started swimming until when you were at Notre Dame, going through like your third year, as you mentioned, did you ever have a moment where you were like, I've achieved what I wanted to achieve, like within swimming, I'm good to go? Or was it always kind of like just grinding the whole way through, like always just trying to get better?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I to start with a direct answer, no, I do not think I ever achieved what I wanted to achieve in swimming personally, but I've come to peace with that for a long time now. And the reason I say that is when I got into college, I was pretty, I mean, by most standards, I was a pretty good swimmer, but when I got into college, I had already started to kind of plateau a little bit in terms of my progression. Um, While I got to Notre Dame, I noticed that a lot of the students that weren't athletes were, really locked in on their studies. They were having fun, quite frankly. And there I kind of was faced with a choice. It was like, do I want to continue to really go all in on this and neglect other things in order to potentially, qualify for Olympic trials or make the Olympics? Realistically, that probably wasn't going to happen. I was 5'9". I'm naturally a more muscular person, so I just didn't have the like. Let's just say I kind of filled out, and it didn't really seem like I had much more to go in terms of becoming a significantly better swimmer. So I decided to, continue training to the best of my ability at swim practices that I went to, but I made sure that I didn't neglect my studies, outside. I really wanted to make sure that I could go toe to toe with any person at Notre Dame that did not was not recruited for a sport,
Yeah.
and I took immense pride in that at the time.
Yeah, makes sense. We'll circle back again to some of your swim experiences in a little bit, but now I want to kind of take a step back and walk through your journey in college to where you are now today. So at Notre Dame, you studied business analytics, correct?
Yes.
I want to know what drew you to that major? Because sometimes some schools might not necessarily offer business analytics, or students might not know that business analytics even exists to kind of go into. So what drew you to that? And then also, how did that kind of shape your thinking about business and potentially like career paths that you want to go towards?
Yeah, great question. So when I got to Notre Dame, I initially wanted to be pre-med, which is, I feel like, a very common thing. But a lot of people growing up aren't really attuned into all different types of, business careers. You just know you hear about doctor, you hear about lawyers, and you choose one. So that was one of those people. I started out pre-med for about a day, and then unlike some of my peers, I'm thankful that I got out of it before actually, the drop period. So
Too late, yeah.
savored my GPA. Uh, but because I didn't actually apply to the business school on my way into Notre Dame, I couldn't actually go into it directly. So I had to do the next best thing, which I thought was economics. So I was studying economics, taking some of the baseline level courses, and I really enjoyed the economic theory, especially microeconomics. I felt it very relevant to explain a lot of things, supply and demand, price elasticity, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for me, economics apparently also requires advanced calculus. So I had to take calculus one, didn't do too great in that. I had the option of going on to calculus two and continuing economics, or just hoping that the business school takes me in, which it's wasn't a guarantee at the time.
All right.
And I think my backup plan was to study political science or something and go to law school. So I
Just
applied for the
pivoting.
yeah, exactly. So I applied for the business school, got in. Can't choose your major for the business school until like I think the end of your sophomore year, at least at the time.
Mhm.
Um, I knew I didn't want to do accounting. I knew I didn't want to do finance at the time. I do work in finance now, but at the time I did finance. I perceived finance as something that was incompatible with my personality type at the time.
Mhm.
So I was into technology. So I wanted to do a major they used to have called information technology management.
Yep.
So I was dead set on doing that. And then it turns out they created a brand new major, which my year, the class of 2019, was the first year that could major in, and that's business analytics.
Wow.
And that was in response to a growing demand for people with data skills and analyst skills in business. So I didn't know anything about it, but I took a chance on it because it sounded cooler than information technology management, and I thought that it was at the time I thought it was like it's kind of comparable to the finance major. So I studied business analytics, and I thought it would be great to get the business education and the technical skills of Python and R and SQL and all of those.
Yeah. Wow, you kind of like lucked out with that timing of them introducing business analytics to your school, because obviously now we know how big business analytics and analytics overall is in the business world. So you kind of just being ready to jump into that, it worked out perfectly. Going back to when you studied at Notre Dame, you said you were going towards medical school, pre-med. Um, what made you said within a day you decided that was not it for you?
Yeah.
What was that kind of turning point so quick that you were like, no, I don't want to go this route?
Yeah, great question. So I actually had decided already by the second semester of my senior year, but I entered day one with the major and then I switched. I decided that because I took AP chemistry my senior year of high school, and Oof. Sohrab, let me tell you that I quickly learned that class was not for me. I was good at AP Bio, but the chemistry, which I know is going to be the bulk of it at the end of the day, was
Not a
something I knew I just did not want to do. So, I like to cut my losses when I can, especially when
yeah.
I know something isn't going to be for me before without, going too deep into it.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's a lesson right there because I'm sure there's students out there that kind of have an idea that it might not be the right path for them, but they're going to be like, oh, I've already been here this long. Might as well just push through it. So there's a lesson
Yeah,
right there where just cut your losses early because then at the end it's not going to be worth it. Might as well just lose a little bit now and then, fix your path and like be at the end and be like, wow, I just wasted all this time.
fully agree. It's like sunk cost fallacy. It's like
Sunk
I already
cost.
spent all this time. Why not keep going? But you could
Exactly.
waste your time.
So before I go to my next question, you said that at the time you weren't really interested into accounting or finance. Obviously now you're in finance. Looking back, if you could go back, do you think knowing what you know now, do you think you would have chosen going the finance route, majoring in finance, or you think that business analytics was still the better choice?
Now, yes, the answer is yes. I would have gone back and chosen finance, and for these reasons, I think business analytics is a great skill set and a great major. However, I do, based on my 6 years of working at a college, I do think that a lot of those skills you can pick up by doing online courses on platforms like Coursera or EDX or anything like that. In the academic setting at Notre Dame, we certainly went deep into it in terms of like applying business cases and so on. But if I were to do it again, I think let's put it like this. I worked with a lot of people who are more experienced and older who studied a major called Management Information Systems back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Yep.
That major doesn't exist anymore. I have a feeling the same might be the case for business analytics. I think it is potentially buzzwordy. To be quite frank with you, I think analyst skills are important and will stay, but I think technology comes in cycles. There's management information systems, then there's information technology management, then there's robotic process automation, there's big data, there's data science.
Yeah.
I think I might have been excited by the new major at the time, and if I were to go back, I would have studied finance because finance is timeless. Accounting is timeless. Marketing is timeless. Those are timeless business disciplines that will always evolve with the times. And for that reason, I would have chosen finance.
Right. And I think like if somebody was to make that decision now, maybe like you said, there's plenty of other ways to learn analytics. But I guess at the time too, it paid off for you because it was a new thing coming in your school, new thing overall. So I think the timing made it at least very much worth it for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So during your college, I know that you interned twice at PwC. So I want to know how did that experience at PwC, how was that like for you? How did you attain it? And you obviously interned there twice, so it was a good experience that you went back the following summer. So what made you make that decision of I want to go back to the same company, intern twice versus doing an internship at two different places? Because I'm sure there's students out there that are probably debating whether they should go back to the same company or go get a different experience, different field, different company.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first interned at PwC, it was a part of their START internship program, which I'm not sure if it still exists, but it was a great sophomore internship for people that are traditionally underrepresented in business. So I got that opportunity to intern and do a rotation within their advisory practice, specifically their forensic technology advisory practice. So I learned it was more about baseline learning of less so about like what technology, forensic technology, or any of that like management consulting stuff is, but more about how to operate in office, how to network, how
Yeah.
to do things like that, coffee chats. That was primarily the goal. While the junior year internship, which at the time was called advanced, which is like this like the regular like junior year internship, that one was more of like client service focus. You would get staffed on a client and be a part of the team. So after my sophomore internship, I got a return offer for the technology consulting practice, and then I interned in the technology consulting practice formally my junior year. And I didn't go to another company for an internship because I got along well with the professionals at PwC. I truly felt like it was a great company to be at. I didn't at the time, I didn't really see I wasn't really looking for much optionality. That wasn't sort of how I was at that time. So just kind of felt like a natural like progression to intern as a junior.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And because I know, like you said, the program that PwC had, it kind of progressed you like one summer from one type of work, and then I'm sure the next summer that you went back, you probably were more hands-on, more clients involved, and kind of got to understand what the day-to-day kind of looks like dealing with clients. So after your internships and after your schooling, I know that you started your full-time career at Deloitte, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So PwC, Deloitte, both of them in the big four. What was that transition like? And tell me about how did you kind of go from working at PwC, and I'm sure you got good experiences there too. Did you want to go to a different big four? How did that opportunity come about versus kind of pursuing PwC full time?
Yes, so the switch was less about the company that I wanted to work out and more about the type of work that I wanted to do.
Mm,
Sometime during college, I came across the career of strategy consulting or management consulting, and I quickly realized what I was doing at PwC was not quite strategy consulting. It was a little bit more focused on technology implementations and like a, starry-eyed college student, I wanted to see
yeah.
what I can do to get into this strategy consulting career. So I started to do case interviews with other people, and case interviews are basically like interviews that strategy consulting firms give to you to see how well you can solve a business problem in real
Mhm.
time. Hopefully that extrapolates to real life. And then I thought I'd give it a shot with a couple of strategy consulting firms. Um, and one of them was Deloitte, which has, or at least at the time, it was called Strategy and Operations. It was a big strategy consulting arm of Deloitte. I was fortunate enough to get an offer for full time. For PwC, on the other hand, I was focused in technology consulting. I didn't quite feel like it was a fit for me personally. Like kind of like the story I told about the pre-med. If something I know is not a fit for me, I try to cut my losses, even though I would have retained the network and stuff. So I moved over to Deloitte, um, and started in their strategy and operations practice for my full-time career, which I at the time is what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it seems like you have pretty good instinct, honestly, and I'm sure that instinct has gone far in your professional career too, where like you have a gut feeling, you're like, this is not right, and you kind of stick with it. Because like that's probably one of the biggest like problems people have is like they have a gut feeling, but then they don't know if they should do it, and then maybe they'll end up making the wrong decision. But you're like, you feel that gut feeling, and then you just go with it. When you said you were doing some case study type interviews to kind of prepare for the strategy consulting type of role.
Mhm.
How were you going about doing these case interviews? What were like the resources? Where were you finding these? And yeah, how was that preparing you?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember just being on the internet, saying last asking, how do I get into strategy consulting? Well, first your resume has to, pass through. Employers like to see that you do extracurriculars. Employers like to see some semblance of leadership on your resume. Employers don't like people who are really good at school but don't do anything else. So, I try to get my resume in a place, with the swimming and the clubs and doing things outside of just academia to position myself to pass pass through the screening.
Yep.
When it comes to the case interview, I heard about two books. One is the most popular one probably to this day. It is Case in Point by Mark Castantino. Or I might have mispronounced his last name. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
Another one is Case Interview Secrets by Victor Cheng. And those two books really helped me learn what a case interview was. They had exercises where I can actually practice on my own, like recording my voice with the phone and so on. Um, it only works if you practice with actual people in real life. So but I partnered up with some people at the Mendoza College of Business at Notre Dame who also wanted to get into strategy consulting, which was a lot of people. So there were programs where you can partner up with people and give each other case interviews, receive case interviews. The practice of giving a case interview also helps you internalize. And I remember doing mental math problems on the side because that was my weak point. The math under pressure, they'll ask you something like, what is like 15% of 100? That hopefully you would get that one pretty fast, but
Yeah.
like they get more difficult.
Yeah.
And all the tricks to do that as fast as possible is what I was drilling on my own outside of the actual practice. And eventually I was able to, become pretty proficient in case interviewing. And then that's what led me to
Wow.
eventually get the offer.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And those two books, those are probably very good resources. I'm going to look those up too. And you said that they have practices and essentially you can work in them and stuff. So those are great resources for that. So you move into Deloitte now and you're into strategy consulting. A lot of people might not necessarily, you hear strategy consulting, you have an idea of what it is, but you don't know exactly what the day to day is, right? People might think like, okay, you just go in, you come up with a game plan strategy for a company, maybe to, raise their profits or decrease their costs, maybe a strategy like that. So, how would you explain, I guess, what a strategy consultant does, especially at Deloitte, and what was the day to day like there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, contrary to what I've been seeing on the internet in the last couple months, it is not as simple as raise your profits and cut your costs. It definitely goes deep, several layers deeper. At Deloitte, I did a lot of different types of projects, and not all of them fall under the bucket of strategy consulting. To be frank, my very first project at Deloitte was an operations transformation project with group insurance company that's based in the South. And what they were doing is basically they had implemented this new claims processing technology to make their claims essentially process more efficiently. And my job was to go in there and to basically try to reinvent the operating model as it relates to that technology. So the operating model is like how the people, the processes, and the technology all fit together to basically actually go and process those claims. So part of my job was basically like looking into their contracts management system and looking in the different clauses that they have and trying to map that to the new system. A lot of like granular, detailed work that fits into the broader picture. But that was the type of work that I would do as an analyst, on my first project at Deloitte. Another project, on the other hand, which is a little bit more to strategy consulting, was a product strategy project that I did for a large healthcare payer, and also a healthcare provider. They do both. And what they were looking for was to basically create these provider-facing products, B2B products that essentially enhance the way that they work together and enhance their relationships. For example, electronic health record sharing system. This client can implement that to basically in real time see how the patients are doing, and in real time the provider staff can see, whether the company is going to pay for said claims or not. A lot of that was done on paper. It didn't really do any coding or any
Yeah.
implementation, but it was like more of like the top end before another group would probably go in and try to implement that.
Yeah, I can see exactly what you mean by that. It goes a lot deeper than what people think at the high level, what strategy consulting is.
Hmm.
And honestly, I see why you wanted to kind of pivot towards strategy consulting because I just feel like there's so much more to learn in that area because you get to essentially learn how each organization, how each company works, how their people work, what their processes are like. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when you said you were at PwC and I guess the type of work area you were in was more implementation consulting. Um, is that why you kind of were more interested in strategy because of the type of work that you would be exposed to versus implementing a technology over and over again, kind of for different clients?
Yes, so it was twofold. It was like I had an idea of what consulting was, just like a lot of college students have an idea what a career, like what life is, and then life hits you. I had an idea what consulting was, and when I was at PwC, my technology consulting internship, well, it was great. I had a great team. It was a great time. Like I had a client, an airline as a client, and they were doing an ERP implementation. I just knew I wanted to do strategy consulting, and I knew that I finally learned that technology consulting is different from operations consulting, which is different from strategy consulting. There are a lot of layers. So actually, what I did instead of doing the ERP implementation work, which I did for like a week or two, I honestly spoke up and I expressed, hey, like PwC has strategy and as their strategy arm, hey, I actually want to work here. I know that was at the time I was pretty bold. So I said like, is there anything I can do? And they were pretty much like, no. And then I just kept pushing.
Yeah.
And then eventually they allowed me to do my own intern project there, which I did on my own. I downloaded a ton of data from the FAA, like airline, sorry, excuse me, the the Federal Aviation Administration, I believe, that had data on like the different airlines' revenues, costs, and so forth. And I uploaded it to Tableau, and I did like a drill down analysis using the skills that I was learning in real time at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Then presented my findings, which basically said that my client, which was a low cost airline, or at least they branded themselves as a low cost airline, actually had a really large expense in something called line service expense, which is basically the costs associated with the plane when it's at the gate. And that was, that was something that they were like, wow, this, I can't believe an intern did this. We could actually use this type of analysis for all of our transportation clients. So not just airlines, but also trains,
Yeah.
and so forth. So, and the reason I'm taking you down this path is because it actually led me to getting an interview with strategy. And even though I got a return offer at PwC, for the technology consulting practices, I actually also got a return offer to go in strategy and technology strategy practice because I got the interview. I did the case interview and
Yeah.
I ended up getting it. Nonetheless, I still ended up choosing Deloitte because it was more generalist versus strategy and was going to be technology strategy,
Yeah.
which I thought was in the beginning of my career, I wanted more optionality. So I thought that it would be better to be a generalist.
Yeah. PwC gave you that offer at the end and you said, too late now. I already asked you guys plenty of times. It's too late.
Yeah.
So after Deloitte being in strategy consulting, you moved to EY Parthenon. Another, I understand, I think, from my understanding, EY Parthenon kind of partnered with EY or EY bought them out and it became EY Parthenon. What was that transition going again to another big four company? And I believe you started doing M&A projects and M&A work there, correct? So
Yes.
what made you want to make that pivot now that you're kind of in strategy consulting is the field that you kind of were interested in going into? What made you want to be like, okay, now I want to pivot to M&A? And how did you break into that, actually, that role and area as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a similar theme as my other switches in the past. It was the type, less about the company, more about the type of work I want to do. So I found myself as a generalist at Deloitte, but after 2 years there, I had to sit and reflect, and I realized I wasn't really getting the project experiences that I wanted. It was, I think, yeah, I was early in my career, so I was basically chosen for projects, and I didn't have much of a say on what kind of projects I wanted to do, or the type of work or the type of practices. It was I felt like some of my peers were doing some of the projects that I wanted to do while I was doing projects that I didn't see as congruent with the career that I wanted in the future.
Yeah.
Um, I saw a job posting for UI Parthenon. I cold applied actually. After I had gotten promoted to consultant, the second level at Deloitte, so I cold applied. And I applied actually to, I believe, this practice that UI Parthenon has called the Software Strategy Group because I know I said I was trying to get away from technology consulting, but I do like technology. I do like when things touch it, at least a little bit. I didn't really know much about the group. So I got an email from a recruiter, and the recruiter basically said, "Hi, David. Our software strategy group usually, has people that can code and worked in technology before." And I'm like, "Oh, that's, I can code, but I can't like it's data
Yeah.
analyst skills rather than computer science." However, we have an opening in our healthcare transaction strategy practice. So if you'd like, I can put your resume in front of the partner. So I said, yes, absolutely. I'd love to hear more about that. A lot of my clients at Deloitte had been healthcare clients. So I went through the interview process, great group, great team, got the offer, and then eventually started at EY Parthenon doing mostly mergers and acquisitions and adjacent work. So like some value creation, some transformations, but mostly things that revolved around M&A.
Yeah. How would you describe the, I guess, difference between the environment and like environment of work between Deloitte and EY? I know you didn't really work full time at PwC, if you can speak on the full time environment there too, but yeah, what's the work environment difference between Deloitte, EY?
Yeah, absolutely. So Deloitte was very networking focused, internal networking. So in order to get on a project at Deloitte, at least I could speak from my time there and my own experience, but it seemed like you had to network with a lot of professionals, complete proposals for their group, attend happy hours, sort of a lot of that type of stuff, in order if you wanted to do your desired work. And there was really no telling like, if it would work or not. At EY Parthenon, or EY, and specifically EY Parthenon, because that was my experience. Um, I was hired directly into a group, so I sort of had a network from the ground, from the get-go, pretty much. Uh, I would say EY seems to be a little more focused on what they do. I think the corporate culture at Deloitte is they're very polished. They're very, very, very polished, and they care a lot about what they do, but Deloitte also appears to be trying to do a lot of different things. EY seemed to be a little bit more focused on, its strategic priorities from my perspective. Like we had a practice that was M&A. A lot of other practices supported M&A in
Mm,
general. That was my perception. And then EY appeared to um the personality type of EY professionals appeared to be very down to earth. Like we have work, let's get it done. No need to run yourself into the ground if not needed. And I really appreciated that about EY.
yeah, makes sense. So now let's make a shift and let's zoom on your current role and kind of what strategic finance looks like at a higher level. So after EY Parthenon, you move to where you're at now at Geller, and you're leading a long-term planning and strategy for major philanthropic foundations. So without naming any names, what kind of decisions or challenges do you help solve on a day-to-day basis? And yeah, what does your day-to-day duties look like there?
Yeah, absolutely. So for my clients at Geller, what I basically focus on is long-term sustainability. So, uh, this is a relatively new industry for me. I've been working here for about a little over a year now, maybe closer to a year and a half. The philanthropic nonprofit industry. It's different from for-profit industries where you have to answer to shareholders. In the philanthropic industry, your shareholder is basically the amount of value and good work that you do for society. So my job at the highest level is how do we ensure that this good work continues without any hiccups, any financial hiccups for the indefinite future. So to get more specific, my role, I'm a strategic finance manager. I do a lot of financial modeling when it comes to granting, expenses, asset balances meaning like how much money the philanthropic foundation has in order to and has to invest in order to give it out over time. And I do a lot of decision support, executive decision support. So anytime leadership has a question about like if we want to grant significantly more money in the coming years, do we have the infrastructure to do it? Do we, can we do it without, having to wind down our foundation 10 years earlier than we had planned? And just questions like that. So I tend
Yeah.
to run like a master model that combines all those things.
Makes sense. Do you find it more rewarding working like behind the scenes as a strategic partner as kind of work you're doing now compared to like, being on the front lines, presenting recommendations like externally in consulting to like clients face to face?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely different. I think I always knew that, once I leave consulting is by the nature you're going to be, someone in their early 20s potentially sitting in a room with the someone's very senior at a client, a CEO, potentially if you're lucky, a CFO, a senior vice president, so on. Here, I regularly actually work. So our company does outsourced CFO services at Geller, CFO advisory. So we are essentially the entire finance team for the client, essentially. So I actually do work directly with our chief financial officer, who serves as the outsourced chief financial officer of the client. So I still kind of get that executive exposure. I, interface with her on a regular basis, and a lot of other senior people. Now, when it comes to the people that actually lead the foundation, I not quite there yet. That's usually what our CFO does, speaks directly with them. But
Right.
I think consulting prepared me and gave me like that executive presence polish in order to sit there in the room with them and hold a conversation.
Absolutely. How would you, like, in a few words, if you were to describe somebody, let's say somebody much younger, earlier, out of college, out of school, if they ask, like, how would you describe the work environment at Geller? How would you describe the, progression at Geller? How would you describe that to them?
Yeah, so what I would say is the work environment is very dutiful is the word I would use. People, from what I've noticed, people come ready to work, make sure that they understand that their work is going to a bigger purpose at the end of the day, for the most part. And people collaborate with each other nicely, cleanly. There's never anybody that gets mad. People aren't don't appear to be overly stressed. I do like that environment that, people just treat each other with respect and they do their work, and that's what I appreciate. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I like that. It seems like a kind of like an environment that's very supportive, from what I'm gathering, It kind
Yeah,
of like
absolutely.
supports you and wants you kind of to like succeed and grow there. I want to shift gears now a little bit, because what's kind of like standing out to me from all your professional experiences that you're telling me about how you've kind of progressed and kind of climbed to where you are now at Geller is how you approach performance and discipline on a personal level, and that's kind of has correlated into your professional career as well. So I kind of want to go back to, as we mentioned, you were a Division One swimmer. How do you think your background, shaped the way you think about discipline and consistency, even maybe leadership? Do you think a lot of that came from like your 3 years as a Division One swimmer? Because obviously I'm not a Division One athlete, let alone a Division One swimmer, which I think it's one of the hardest sports. I'm assuming, and you can tell me more based on the amount of work, dieting, amount of practices. Do you think that level of hard work and discipline consistency has contributed to your level of success in, Deloitte, EY, and now at Geller?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I learned a lot of life lessons from swimming, that carry over to real life. I guess swimming can also be real life, but that carries over to my professional career, both good and bad. So when I swam, I had to do 2 workouts a day. I woke up, had practice at 6 a.m., had class in college or in high school too. Practice after school, 3:30 p.m. or in college, 5:30 p.m. in high school. And then I would have to do my homework. It was something that I did every single day. And it gave me a baseline level of I'm going to use this word again, duty.
Yeah.
Like it's like I know I have to do this. I don't want to do it, but I have to do it. I have to go be at practice at 6 a.m. I have to do what my coach says, whether or not I think the workouts make sense or not. And it really just like made me a disciplined person, which is something that I've carried over to my career. If somebody says something that I don't think makes sense. I'm going to have to do it anyway. I might, offer my opinion, as, I'm getting to the level of my career where I, just don't just take blind orders. Like I will say something if I truly think it makes, if doing something another way, it makes more sense than doing it
Yeah.
a certain way. But I think it really helps in that aspect. And
Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
no worries. Another thing I wanted to touch on is, in my swimming career, I did have a setback, that shaped who I am today. And I was supposed to win, at least by, the statistics, I was supposed to win the New York State Championship in the 100-yard butterfly my senior year. And I didn't. I got touched out by someone who was a junior at the time and when I was a senior and dropped several seconds in his event. But I can't blame him. I can only blame myself because I got complacent that year. I committed to Notre Dame the year prior in October, and I decided to phone it in for the rest of the year. And I can only own that on myself, and that's why I lost. So ever since then, I just never decided to stay complacent. I'm going to continue learning. I'm going to continue growing. If I feel myself getting stagnant, I'm gonna make something out of it and continue growing. So that's really the biggest lesson that swimming ever taught me.
Yeah, I mean that's a good lesson. Is if you do face a setback or something bad, maybe people see it as a failure, that you take away something from it, you take a lesson from it, you don't just dwell on it and continue, and which is what you've done. You've learned from it and you've grown on it. You also mentioned consistency, which, I liked when you said that because you said there are days that you don't want to go to practice, but you had to get up because you had to do it. There is a quote that I always keep in the back of my head. It's from Tom Brady, and he says that, you don't have to be anything special to be extraordinary. You just have to be what most people aren't, which is
Mm,
consistent. And I agree
powerful.
because, a lot of people like quit at certain point, and if you just consistently do little by little by little, you get ahead of 99% of the people there. So that's what I like too as well. So I know that I've seen that you work and you mentioned that you study outside of your work. You study finance, you study computer science, human behavior. It's a wide range of different topics that you study and you kind of take part in outside of, your free time essentially. How do you choose what topic or what area you want to learn next?
That's a great question. So I do like to spend a lot of time learning, and I'm sort of a systems thinker. Everything, a lot of things I do are very calculated. Like I'm a planner. A lot of things I do are very intentional. So when it comes to like learning about computer science, learning about finance, and so on, um, in the last couple of years, I got a professional certificate in computer science from Code Academy. I got a financial modeling evaluation analyst certification from Corporate Finance Institute. I reskilled in data science. I just recently took and passed the part one exam of the certified management accountant CMA
Wow.
exam. Like I'm hoping to take I already took part two, but I'm hoping to get my scores back and get certified. And all of this is for a reason. They're kind of all over the place, right? Like I don't work in computer science. I probably never will. Like I don't do I don't do hard data analysis in my job. It's a lot of financial modeling. I do this because I'm relatively young. Um, and I truly believe that before the age of 30, everyone should try to explore as much as possible. Even if you don't think you might be good at it, you should try to explore just to confirm that you're not good at it. So that's why I did the computer science professional certificate. I did it. Do I think I am going to become the next software engineer? No, because that's not where my strengths are. I studied business analytics and I continued to learn data science. Am I going to do it? It doesn't seem like it because that's not where the forces have been pulling me. Um, Finance and strategy, that seems to be where my strengths lie. That, being able to interface with executives, being able to provide logic-based decision support, that seems to be what I'm good at. So the reason why I've learned all of these things is so I can cross out what I'm not good at and focus on what I am good at, hopefully into, my 30s and beyond.
I really like that. First, I want to point out that you shouldn't say relatively young. You are young. I feel like everybody should say they are young until they're like, I don't know, 60, 70, 80. So you are young, not relatively young. And then I also like the point that you mentioned about wanting to confirm what you're not good at, to kind of cross that out, or at least trying things because you never know if you're going to like something or be good at something unless you try it. Which is like the saying, leave no stone unturned. And I really like that point as well because I feel like a lot of times people will think about, oh, I might be good at that. I want to go try it. And then they don't. And I always think that like it's gonna be so much worse living with that regret down the line. Like you're gonna be like, oh, what if? That what if is gonna kill you. So might as well just go try it. If it doesn't work out, boom, now now you have a clear mind there. Um, so with all these extra lessons, tools, frameworks that you've learned, has any of these from outside work? And I know you said that you use a lot of them with like executives in your meetings. Can you name on top of your head, and it's okay if you can't, think of on the spot, but a tool or a framework or insight that you kind of use that work and you were like, wow, it was good that I learned about it.
It's a great question, and it's less so about the hard skills, the textbook finance, any kind of algorithm you might learn in a computer science course. It's more about the soft skills, which I also try to study in my free time as well. So I read books like, I recently read The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. To be clear, that is not the 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah.
Just want to make that
Yeah.
clear in case anyone's watching this, that this is a much more neutral human behavior book.
Yeah.
And I read other books like Thinking Fast and Slow, and so forth, like those type of books. And I try to do it to internalize soft skills and learning about how people behave. Because I spent a lot of time So I'm trying to learn hard skills and thinking that I can brute force hard skills into, getting better jobs, getting better opportunities, and so forth. But I got to a point where I realized, you can be the best coder in the world, you can be the best at math, but if you can't talk to people, if you don't have the EQ, if you don't like know when to stop talking during a meeting, when to broadcast your accomplishments, when to play down your accomplishments, then you're probably not going to get, you're going to hit a ceiling. So I
Yeah.
try, I'm not saying I'm the best like communicator in the world, but I'm actively trying to, increase that exposure to different modes of thought, human behavior, like attending different things and listening to people, and just trying to like refine my soft skills and hoping that helps, develop my leadership and career progression.
Absolutely. Yeah, that completely makes sense. And kind of going off of that, I've learned that one of your self-driven projects that you turned into something that, in my opinion, is very super interesting, that I saw online was about your NFL Combine model that you worked on. So I want to quickly talk on this NFL Combine project that you worked on, where I believe you built a predictive model for a 40-yard dash time. Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yes.
So how did this come about for you to be working on building such model? And what were you trying to prove with the model and the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was, I was working at EY Parthenon and I was doing a lot of like M&A and strategy work. And I felt like, you know, I'm good at like a lot of like, I'm good at data analysis. I'm good at modeling. I don't feel like I'm doing as much of that anymore. I was doing a lot of project management there, and I wanted to really like flex my skills a little bit, and then also combine that with my business analytics degree. So I decided to come up with some sort of like portfolio project to do. And I wanted to do something that was related to my interests, which it was football. So sports and human performance in general. I love working out, but football data is readily available. So I decided to use the NFL Combine data, and I decided, hey, like I can use Python. I can see if I can try to model out some machine learning models in order to predict what your 40-yard dash time would be as a football player, depending on factors like your position, how high you jump, your three cone drill score, and other like metrics like that. Um, Once again, like I mentioned earlier, just dabbling to see, if this can go somewhere, like, if it can really, if I can get into the human performance industry or
Yeah.
something like that. So I thought it would be a great, thing to do. And I very much enjoyed like working on that.
Yeah. Well, you hit a pretty strong R square scored. If I remember correctly, it was somewhere like 0.73, 0.74, which is very good. What it's saying is essentially 74% of the variance is explained by the model, which for a real world application, that's a really good score. So based on what you say, like you will always wonder if you could maybe pivot to, that area. Did you ever see it as something that could, your model see it as something that could scale or be useful for scouts or teams? Because that's a pretty good score for your model to have.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I think scouts and teams can use the principle of the model that you can use, like you can predict scores based on several athletic metrics, like how big someone is, how tall they are, some like past performance metrics on predicting like an unknown. The model as it is probably isn't suitable to just be shipped off because the NFL Combine happens at the like it all happens at the same time.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you would have to have the way that my model works is basically you would have so an athlete would have to do all of those combine drills like the bench press tests and so forth before doing the 40-yard dash, before predicting that, which probably isn't realistic, but I
yeah.
think the principle of the model can be used in not just football but any kind of sports industry to predict how an athlete would do. For example, I'm wearing an Oura ring on my finger. I wear an Apple Watch sometimes, and I get a lot of recovery statistics like my heart rate variability, which is a measure of how ready you are to tackle the day, pretty much resting heart rate and so forth. Like if someone can get their hands on all of this data, and combine it with real-time performance metrics, you can probably predict how an athlete is going to do on a game day or on a race day. And that's something I'm personally interested in. The work I do is obviously not related to that at all, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, so do you think if you weren't necessarily, directly in finance, do you think you could see yourself working in sports analytics full time?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I think that would be it's like a direct passion of mine, just working in sports analytics, performance analytics. Some people, I would say, some people are more sports people when it comes to like knowing like players and all their stats, and some people are more like human performance people. That's more of me. So I'm like I look into the design of a weightlifting program, a strength and conditioning program. I used to be certified as a personal trainer, by the way.
Yeah.
But I let that expire because it just wasn't worth it for me at any longer. But yeah, I kind of like doing that. Like, how can we make you and I, just regular people or athletes, just reach their potentials? Like with all this data, like you can get from wearables and all of the information we have now in exercise science.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Before I go to the next set of my questions for you, I have to ask, what team do you support? You said your sport that you watch is football. So what's your team? And also, do you watch other sports as well?
Yeah, so for football, college football is my number one. Notre Dame Fighting Irish football, of course, runner-ups in the national championship, 2025, I guess it was this year. Unfortunately, we lost, but we'll be back next year, hopefully. For NFL, the Jets from New York. So,
Nice.
I have some hope for the Jets in the future, but we will see.
Yeah.
Um, um,
Do you
and
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
you can guess.
No, I was going to ask if you watch other sports and like, you said you would obviously if it was, perfect world work that and you could be in sports analytics, you would love it because, you love sports, but you also love the analytics and the tech side of it. Would it just be within football that you'd be interested in that, or would it be other sports too that you would be interested in a sports analytics, role? And what other sports do you follow or would you like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the reason I use football for that is just because football data is easy. A lot of people, American football, a lot of people watch it. But I watch track and field a lot. I like track and field. I never ran track, but I like to run as an adult, like an adult post swimming. I watch swimming and diving, especially during the Olympic cycles. I watch basketball occasionally. And that's really it. It's like I like like I have an affinity for performance-based sports over skill-based sports, excuse me. Performance-based sports over skill-based sports. So just anything where it's like your physical output, I'm really into, and that's where I could see myself being an asset because I just love optimizing. Everyone is different. Everyone has different affinities to like strength training or endurance or somewhere in between. And if people can align their training to the type of athlete and
Yeah.
genetic profile they have, it would be great for them.
Yeah, it would definitely be beneficial, not just for the athletes, but for the teams, coaches, trainers. Yeah, absolutely. And it would be fun being involved with like sports team and athletes as well.
Absolutely.
So to change gears a little bit and kind of wrapping things up here, I'm gonna ask you a few questions that will kind of summarize some of our main points. So starting out, what's a mindset or a mental framework that you come back to often, during your professional career, your day to day?
So a mindset that I usually use is something my father used to say all the time growing up: business before pleasure. And that's not to say that don't prioritize your work-life balance because I very much do that. Like I protect my peace and my space that I have with every job that I've had so far. But I like to make sure that business is done before pleasure, and that can mean anything that you want it to mean. So, for example, I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is I work out. That's not fair to everyone because I am an early morning person. That's my type. Pretty much I wake up early and I go to bed early. Other people do better when they wake up late and go to bed late. But I work out first thing in the morning because that's something that's important to me. And then I start work and then I take care of work and I make sure I take care of work before doing any extracurriculars, even if it is productive, like studying for a professional exam or learning something new. And then I try to have fun after that. So it's less about not having fun and it's more so I make sure I feel at peace in myself by taking care of everything I need to before um, going and having like reaping the rewards of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that definitely leads to less anxiety, less stress, because like the back of your head is clear that you don't have like an outstanding obligation that you have to do, and it probably makes those activities more rewarding as well afterwards because you're like, okay, I did my work and this is kind of rewarding for what I've done. And I know through the episode, early in the episode, you've mentioned multiple different books that you've read throughout your career and that have helped you through your career. So if you were to choose one of those books to suggest to our listeners to read as their next book, what book would that be?
Yes. So the book that I think has helped me the most, I read about 8 years ago or 7 years ago. It's called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, I think. And it's a self-help book. And in that book, he basically outlines, what are all the high performers, like, what did they have in common that they do? I can't, remember all the principles off the top of my head, but I think the first one is like begin with the end in mind, which I think is also a great principle that I could have also shared prior. So begin with the end in mind. It's like, what's your end goal? For me, I want to be in the C-suite someday. I want to run things pretty much. I want to make an impact on society. I used to tell everyone my goal at some point is to hopefully have a Wikipedia page. That's not the goal, but it's a product of, achieving my goals. So how do I get there? I know I have to learn some hard skills in my 20s, learn some soft skills in my late 20s, execute in my 30s, and so on. So that's a book that I think was very helpful in helping me to like internalize some of these habits that help me hopefully become more of a higher performing person.
I love it. I'm definitely going to look that book up and I'm going to get one for myself to read it as well. So last two questions to kind of wrap up our reflection and your advice for anybody that's interested in going to your same path. So the first question is, what's the best career decision when looking back from the beginning of your first internship? What's the best career decision that you made so far?
This is a good one. I think I have two, but if I had to choose one of them, the best career decision that I made was going back to PwC when I think I was a little more outspoken than other people might have been about what I wanted. There's the saying, mouths don't get fed. I really wanted to work in strategy consulting. I knew that where I started would very much influence where I end in terms of my career. And I think by, asking for the strategy consulting experience, I was able to get the experience and leverage it to start working in strategy consulting, which compounds over time. Had I started in another industry that I was not as interested in, it gets harder to switch when you get more experience, but you're afforded the ability and the optionality when you're in college and shortly after college. So I'm really happy that I spoke up for myself early on
Yeah.
when other people might have been afraid to.
Absolutely. And another great lesson right there, closed mouths don't get fed. That will go along with like essentially every stage of everybody's career journey. If you don't ask for something, you're not gonna get it. People are not just gonna come hand out things. You have to ask for it. You have to go and essentially go for it. So last question. Somebody right now is listening to you. They might be in school, figuring out what to study, what internships to go, or they might be early professionals, 1, 2, 3 years into their career, and they're hearing your story and they want to follow your path. What's one piece of advice you would leave them with?
Piece of advice I would leave you with if you're listening to this is twofold. Invest in your hard skills, invest in your soft skills. And that's pretty much it. I would say your hard skills are very important when you are early on and starting out. People have to trust that you could do good work. You're very much at an execution phase. Usually people are asking you to do things and you need to be able to do it and do it well. But don't neglect soft skills as well. It might be uncomfortable for people if you're introverted or a little quiet or shy. I am extroverted, but I'm what, I consider a reserved extrovert. Like like to be around people, but I'm quiet around people.
Yeah.
So it takes me a little bit more time to, be able to speak up sometimes and talk to people and network with people, even though I like being in the crowd. So I think it is the best decision for you to really focus on learning how to talk to people, learning how to be agreeable, easygoing to an extent. Of course, stand your ground if something is wrong, but it's going to go a long way. Being good at things, but not being sociable is unfortunately something that doesn't turn out well for certain career types. And I think that it's in your best interest to focus on both.
Absolutely. Well said, David. Well, David, this was an awesome conversation. I seriously appreciate how thoughtful and open you were about your experiences, about your advice. And I personally took away a lot from our conversation, and I'm sure our listeners will take away a lot as well. And hopefully, there are people that are on your path that will kind of take away something and maybe follow the same journey as you did. So, thanks again for coming on Career Tea, and I hope to have you back on again in the future.
So, Rob, thank you for having me on. It was great speaking with you, and I hope you have a great day.